At the end of January, Israeli soldiers disguised themselves by dressing as doctors and women in order to raid a hospital and kill Hamas terrorists. The IDF confirmed the plan had been carried out, while CCTV footage released by Palestinian media showed the deadly events unfold. According to the IDF, 3 men were killed, including Mohamed Jalameh, who had relations with Hamas and was plotting a terrorist attack in the immediate future. As Mohamed sat at a hospital with a wounded friend, members of the IDF carefully executed their plot to sneak in, dressed in doctors' scrubs and women's clothing, to kill their targets. Joining me now to walk us through exactly what happened is IDF Captain-in-Reserve Eyal Birim. Eyal, as someone who has worked for the IDF, can you walk me through the intricacies of this operation?
Yes, as we see here, and in many occasions during this horrible war starting for October 7th after Hamas terror attack on Israel, Hamas and the terrorists using human shields and hospitals as the compounds to execute terror attacks. And as Israel is a law-obeying country that fighting to protect its own citizens, this example of the operation is another of a few when Israel executed a pinpointed operation targeted at terrorists in order to make sure that they will not be able to execute their plans. And what these 3 terrorists in this specific incidents plan to do is to do a similar attack for October 7th. And this is exactly why the IDF did this operation on that occasion and that time and on that specific morning.
Eyal, how did you and the IDF find out that this specific terrorist was planning another attack in the immediate future?
It was published by the Shin Bet, the Israeli internal forces, including the IDF, that this group of 3 terrorists were planning to execute a terror attack and use the hospital as the compound to plan it. And they felt that this is their safe haven. And the message that Israel sends during this operation, that there is no safe haven for every terrorist around the country, and that they will go and meet them and make sure that they will not be able to execute their plans. And this is why this operation, an example with many more that was done during the last few months, are ordered to do one thing, and this is to make sure that the massacre that happened on October 7, with more than 1,200 people who've been murdered, will not happen again. This is why it's happened, and this is why we may see more operations like this happening in the future.
So to get down to the nitty-gritty of this specific operation that happened in late January, were soldiers aware that Mohamed would be situated in this hospital with his wounded friend, and then the dozen soldiers carried out straight away? Was it a last-minute operation to when they found out that he would be in that hospital, or was it planned well in advance that he would be there at that time?
Similar operations like this one usually prepared for a long time, but the evidence for having the terrorist and the means, including weapons or any other explosives that were found in the room in the hospitals of this specific terrorist, are usually part of the reason why executing it immediately. Important to say that there are more options of executing an exact terror attack, an exact anti-terror attack like what Israel did. And we could think that Israel can attack from an air force, but when we speak about civilian area and when we want to make sure that no civilian will be hurt, the only way of doing it is sending your forces under a massive risk inside a hospital and finding the terrorists before they understand that this is the IDF forces, killing them and return back home without harming anyone on the way.
Are you finding that it's becoming more common for the IDF to be planning these plotted kills in this war against Hamas?
I find it that the IDF right now will work intensively in order to make sure that both Hamas facilities in Gaza and in the West Bank will be eliminated. And we understand that without doing it, the future of Israel as a country is not sure, as we have an existential threat that was example of how Hamas executed their plans on October 7th, and just was announced again and again that as soon as they will be back in power, they will do more October 7th. And this is why the Israeli citizens are afraid for any future that will happen if Hamas stay in power. And this is why this operation is significantly important.
Going back to what you said before, Eyal, we were speaking about, obviously, Hamas militants using these hospitals as kind of a safe haven. Have you been speaking to a lot of current IDF soldiers on the ground about the difficulties of finding these terrorists? How do you go into finding them that are in these tunnels? We know that there's been these tunnels that we've found in hospitals.
This is one of the complicated mission and the complexity that the IDF face. I was there. I was fighting in Gaza in 2014 in the last war. And in my point of view, what the IDF doing should be praised in international law. But on the one hand, putting civilians aside and calling for people to leave any secure in any unsecured area, like this hospital that was in this hospital that no civilians was hurt, or many other examples in Gaza. And one example that come into my mind and important to mention is the El Shifa hospital, the main compound for Hamas forces in Gaza, that for a long time the IDF called for every civilians to leave it. The IDF get into the hospital, find the tunnels without harming any civilian, and we are speaking in the middle of a war, in the middle of congested area, where a huge tunnel was found with an evidence for holding our kidnapped people. So that's why this operation and many that may come in the future are an example for how the IDF working continuously to protect and to understand that any safe haven that the terrorists find in any place, mostly civilian area, we speak about hospitals, UN facilities and schools, would not be their safe haven. And Israel will get there and will make sure to take out the ammunition and kill the terrorist and protect any civilian that they will find on the way, regardless if that's Israeli or Palestinian.
Eyal, as a captain in reserve, can you walk us through what the training and tactics needed are to undertake operations like this?
The forces that usually execute operations like this are well prepared and trained, and part of their understanding as people who enter and soldiers who enter civilian area is the careful understanding between who is terrorist and who is not. And we can imagine that when they are entering any area that part of it is terrorists who are wearing like civilians, who are going inside, and part of them are even using different tactics to wear like a pregnant woman to get in and out in order just to move ammunition. We saw it happening in Gaza. We saw it happening in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. And this is part of their complexity. So the training that they have for every specific operation is huge. The debrief that they have in order to understand if they did the mission well, how they can make sure that they are finding a terrorist as soon as they can. And in this specific incident, the Israel Defense Forces entered this hospital, find the terrorist, and 10 minutes after left. And this is one of the most example of the pinpointed operation of the IDF, how they're executing perfectly their missions.
Well, on that note, Eyal, not every IDF soldier is qualified to be chosen to be one of these, soldiers that go and operate these well-executed operations. Can you walk me through how one of these dozen soldiers is chosen? They're selected to be involved in one of these operations.
What we see in this example and in many more is the difficulty that the IDF have in order to find the best of the best. And this is after a long process of training. We speak about years of training. Some people go to train for 3 years to be a pilot. Some people in the Israeli army go for 3, 4, 5 years to train in order to be able to execute this kind of missions. This is just a group of a few dozens of people who are capable, usually in every unit, and there are a few units in the IDF that are work into every anti-terror attack to execute that mission. And this is, I believe, is one of the examples for the profession that require and that we are demanding for our people for every mission that they are going for.
From your experience, what differentiates the IDF and these smaller groups of soldiers that are operating these catch and kills from other elite units around the world?
I think we saw a few examples, like here in the UK, of the SAS Special Forces, in the United States for the Delta Forces. And this is part of the elite examples for how Israel is building their forces, is training them, and also are working continuously with different armies around the world in order to learn better tactics, better strategies. And Israel for a long time is collaborating with many Western army, mostly in the UK and in the US, in order to change strategies and to learn more from different difficulties we had. I know particularly that the IDF helped the UK and in the US to prepare for their war in Iraq and Afghanistan from their experiences fighting in congested area, understanding how explosives and terrorists works, and how they can protect their forces and eliminate any civilian casualties.
Just finally, Eyal, the CCTV shows that the Palestinian media released, obviously, shows how ruthless these operations can be in order to track down these terrorists. Why do you think it has to be such a ruthless killing machine in order to kind of get ahead of Hamas?
I think our enemy shows exactly their interest, their motivations, and the only lessons that we have from October 7th that this is not a matter of interest or motivation. This is a matter of capacity and their ability to execute similar attacks. And that's why Israel will work continuously on every intelligence of terrorists and their explosives and their weapons together before they're executing the missions, regardless what's the risk that we have for our forces. And this specific operation can end much more complicated. Thanks God, the IDF did the mission well, they prepared well, and they're also very professional. And that's why no civilians were hurt and all the forces returned back home safe. But this is one of a few examples of how we are continuously executing similar missions and understanding that we don't have any other option except making sure that the future of Israel will be protected, and it will be protected when there will be no Hamas terrorists able to go safely around Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, or in Gaza.
IDF Captain-in-Reserve Eyal Birim, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.